Hi girls! Today we're going to talk about Unit 4. So we're going to be talking about tenses that we can use in the past and also about the oral exam. Okay, so first I'm going to put the presentation. The unit's topic is what happened. Well, that's a title. And as I told you before, we're going to be talking about the different tenses that we can use when we're talking about the past. And here we're going to see how to tell a story that happened to us, not a fictional story, but a real story, okay? So we're going to start with the first tense, simple past. I already uploaded this presentation into Schoology. You can check it in the midterm folder, so you can check it anytime. I'm just going to explain it briefly because we already talked about this topic in, well, last year, so we already talked about it a long time ago. So for simple past, for affirmative sentences, we have first the pronoun, then the verb in past, and then the complement or whatever you want. The verb in the past is going to depend either if it's a regular verb or an irregular verb. Regular verbs, all of them end with ed. Remember that. There's some rules. For example, if you have a verb that ends with a y, and before the y we have a vocal, then that's why. You just add ed and that's it. But if you have a consonant before the y, then you have to change that y into an I and then add ed. For example, study, studied, and here we have it. Let me just mark it. So here it is. You have to change the y into an I and then add ed. And for example, we have some verbs that end with consonant, vowel, consonant. In those cases, you're going to have to double the last consonant and add ed. For example, shop, shopped. So that's mainly it. In affirmative sentences is when you're going to change the verb into the past form. And for irregular verbs, remember you have to memorize them. There's no trick, there's no rules, there's no anything. So you just have to memorize them. For negative sentences, we don't have the verb in the past form in negative sentences or in questions. We only have the verb in the past form in the affirmative sentences. For negative sentences, we use the auxiliary verb did plus not. So instead of saying he didn't played football, we don't change the verb into the past form when we have negative sentences. Remember that, please. And an exception for this one will be verbs, sentences that use the verb to be. For example, instead of using he didn't be football, it will have to be he wasn't tired. They weren't happy. I wasn't in the school. So you're going to have to change the verb, the auxiliary verb. We're not going to use the auxiliary verb did, and we're going to use the past form of the verb to be. Okay, and plus not for the negative sentences. That's the only verb that is not going to use the verb did, the auxiliary verb did. Okay, remember that. And the same for interrogative sentences. For all questions in simple past are going to start with did. Did he play football? Did he eat chocolate? Did we, I don't know, did we study last year? Can be anything. Again, the only exception will be sentences with the verb to be. Instead of starting the question with did, we're going to start the question with was or were. Remember, you're going to use was with all sentences that have the pronoun I, he, she, or it. And you're going to use were with all the sentences that use you, we, or they. Okay, so remember that. All of this is already in the presentation for the simple past. If you have any questions, remember, you can ask me anytime. Okay, so that's it for the simple past. Then we have the past continuous. Past continuous is exactly like all continuous tenses that we had ing at the end of the verb. But here we have instead of I am playing for an action that I'm doing currently, we're going to change the auxiliary verb into was or were, depending on the pronoun. So here, for example, he was playing. And here we're talking about an action that happened in the past. Okay, so we're only going to change the auxiliary verb into was or were, depending on the pronoun that we have. And for negative sentences, it's going to be exactly the same. We're only going to use wasn't or weren't. And interrogative sentences, was he playing football? Were we playing football? So it's going to be exactly the same. Remember, we use the past continuous to talking about activities that happen in a period of time, but in the past. Okay. So we are going to use was or were depending on the pronoun, and we're going to add ing at the end of the verb. And some of you were having trouble with this in the exam, in the midterm exam. Remember that we're going to double the consonant only when we have consonant, vowel, consonant. We're not going to double it, for example, with right. That it was a really common mistake, don't worry. Some of you were writing with double T, and that's not how it works. We're only going to double the last consonant when the verb ends with consonant, vowel, consonant. For example, shop, H-O-P, that's a consonant, vowel, consonant. Or begin, G-I-N. So we're going to double the consonant in those cases, and only in those cases. Remember, there's some rules too, for example, with the stressed vowel. So if you have any questions about that, we were explaining this last year, but if you have any questions, you can ask me, okay? So that's it for the past continuous. Now, there's some verbs that we don't usually use the past continuous or any continuous tense with. For example, with stative verbs. Stative verbs are verbs that talk about thinking, feeling, senses, and other things that don't really work in a period of time, so it wouldn't really make sense to use the continuous tenses here. So for example, believe, dislike, now, like, love, all of this. We can use them in some specific cases. For example, I think it's McDonald's. I'm loving it. Loving, here it's ing. But most of the time, we don't use ing with these verbs, okay? So for example, I wanted to stop, but I couldn't. And we're not going to use I was wanting to stop. So you're not going to use the ing with these verbs, okay? In most cases. And then we have sentences where we use the past continuous and the simple past. When we use the past continuous and simple past in the same sentence, we're going to be talking that the past continuous action happened first or started first. It happened during a period of time, and then the action that is in simple past interrupt or happen in the middle of this action. So the one that happened first is going to be the action that is in past continuous, and then the action in simple past. Okay, so for example, while I was working out, it calculated how many calories I burned. So first I was working out, and then it calculated how many calories I burned. So it happened in the middle of this action, not before that or at the beginning of it. So it happened in the middle or even at the end of it. A man was looking for his cat when he found a suspicious package inside a trash can. So for example, a man was looking for his cat. It's happening in a period of time. And when he found a suspicious package, it's going to happen either in the middle or at the end of the action, okay? So when we use these two tenses together, remember the simple past action happened in the middle or at the end or interrupt the action that happened in past continuous. While I was studying, I suddenly felt sleepy. So here we have, I was studying from a period of time and I felt sleepy in the middle of this action, okay? So can you see the difference between these two sentences? When the guest arrived, Jane was cooking dinner. When the guest arrived, Jane cooked dinner. So in the first one, when the guest arrived, Jane was cooking dinner because we're using the past progressive uh, action, because we're using the past progressive in Jane was cooking dinner, we're telling that the action for cooking dinner, she started before the guest arrived. And in the second one, when the guest arrived, Jane cooked dinner. It's telling us that the guest arrived first and then Jane started cooking dinner. So that's why we use these different tenses to tell us which action happened first and to tell us the context of the events that happened in this story. Okay? And then how do we join these these two sentences? So, for example, we have a sentence in past continuous and the other one in simple past. We can join them depending on which sentence we want to use the conjunction with. So we can use different conjunctions. While, as, and when are the most used ones. While and as are used mostly with the past continuous sentence, and when is used with the simple past sentence. So we can join two sentences in 6 different ways. For example, Sarah hurt her ankle while she was running. While Sarah was running, she hurt her ankle. We can use any sentence at the beginning of it. It's exactly the same. But remember that when we have the conjunction at first, at the beginning of the sentence, then we are going to have to separate them between, put a comma between the two of them. For example, when Sarah was running, comma, she hurt her ankle. We're always going to use a comma in these cases and when we have the conjunction at the beginning of the sentence, okay? And then we have the past perfect. The past perfect, I think you saw this one in the previous semester, I'm not really sure, but we had already seen the present perfect. So it's going to be kind of similar. For the past perfect, we're going to use the auxiliary verb had, and we're going to use the past participle of the verb. It's not the simple past form, it's a past participle. For regular verbs, it's going to be exactly the same. We only add ed and that's it. But with irregular verbs, it's going to be a little bit different. Okay, so first of all, when do we use the past perfect? We use the past perfect when we want to talk about an action that happened before an action that already happened in the past. So we have an action in the past, and then we want to talk about an action that happened before that action in the past. We're going to use the past perfect, okay? Remember, we're going to use the auxiliary verb had with all of them. Here, there's no exceptions. But we have to use the past participle form of the verb. So for the regular verbs, you have to memorize them. Here we have a list of the most common irregular verbs. You can check this link because there's many of them. There's around 200 irregular verbs in English. You don't have to memorize all of them. Some of them are not really common, but you have to memorize the most common ones. So here's a list of some of the most common ones. For example, the most important ones are be, do, and have. They are really used, okay? So the past participle is been for be, okay? So you have to notice the difference between simple past and past participle. You are not going to use the simple past in any perfect tenses, okay? So you have to use the past participle. Here, I really can't help you that much with this irregular verbs, so you just have to memorize them, study them. I don't know, there's many games even and apps. I don't know, there's many things around in the internet that you can use to try to memorize all these irregular verbs. There's even songs in YouTube, so you can check them too. So past perfect with other tenses. When we use the past perfect, remember the past perfect is to talk about an action that happened in the past before another action that happened in the past. So when we use the past perfect together with simple past or past continuous, it means that the past perfect action happened before the other actions. So here, for example, I wasn't able to pay for lunch because I had left my wallet at work. So the action in the past is I wasn't able to pay for the lunch, but before that, I had left my wallet at work, okay? So we have here the timeline, and first, the action that happened first is that I left my wallet at work, and then I wasn't able to pay for my lunch, okay? So the action that happened in the action that we're talking about and using the past perfect for, it's always going to be the action that happened in the past, the action that happened first, okay? And when we use all these three tenses together, I was visiting the museum when I ran into an old school friend who I hadn't seen for over 10 years. So here we have the three tenses: simple past, past continuous, and past perfect. So the action that happened first, remember, is always going to be the action that we're talking about using the past perfect. So the action that happened first is I hadn't seen him because it happened 10 years ago. That's going to be way longer or way before the other actions. Then the action that is going to happen next to it is going to be the one that is in the past continuous. I was visiting the museum. And then the action that happened in simple past. I ran into an old school friend. So first, I hadn't seen that person in 10 years. Then I was visiting the museum. And in the middle of my visit of the museum, I met that person, okay? So that's going to be the order for these actions. First, the action in past perfect, then the action in past continuous, and then the action in simple past. So if you have any question about this, you can ask me anytime. But we're going to have some exercises about this. Now, we can use all these tenses to talk about stories, as I said in the beginning, to talk about stories that happened to us, real stories, or stories that we heard someone else tell us about. So that's an anecdote. It's a short, amusing, or interesting story about a real incident or person. So we can use all these three tenses to talk about stories that happened to us. And some types of events that we talk about, and these are the ones that are going to be for your oral exam, are coincidence, dilemma, disaster, emergency, lucky break, mishap, mystery, triumph. So all these are types of events that we can talk about. And here's some examples. For example, the first one. A man bought an old house for wait a little bit, couldn't see it. So for $10,000. As he was cleaning the attic of his new home, he found an old painting by a famous painter. He had never collected art, but when he took it to a museum, he found out it was worth almost $1 million. So here we're talking about an action that is actually a lucky thing, because he got more money, way more money than he paid for. So that's a lucky break, okay? But we can also have two of them happening at the same time. So for example, my sister bought a new dress for her graduation party. She had saved for months to buy it. When she got to a party, another girl was wearing the exact same dress. That's a coincidence, but also a mishap, because it's something from a lucky thing, because she had saved a lot of time to pay for it. So that's why it's something unlucky or something sad for the person talking about it. And we can also use, this is mainly for the oral exam, we can also use some sentences or phrases to show interest in the other person who is telling the story. Because even in Spanish, it's really rude, well, it's considered rude to, when someone is talking to you and you're just quiet and with your poker face and showing no expression, that shows that you're not really interested or that you're bored in the story. You don't care. So when you want to show that you actually care about the other person, about what that person is telling you, then you can use some sentences, some short phrases. For example, what happened? And then, really? Oh no, oh no way. So you can use any of them. And for example, the ones over here, you can change the last part. For example, that's terrible, that's amazing, that's weird, that's lucky. So you can change according to what the other person is telling you. For example, if the other person is telling you something actually, something that is happy for them, or that is actually something good for them, you're not going to say, oh, that's too bad. Because you're actually happy about them. Well, you're supposed to be happy about them. And at the end, you can just say, oh, what a story, what a coincidence, what a mystery. So you can use any of these short phrases during the oral exam to show that you're actually interested in the other person. but be careful and actually use the ones that go according to the other person. Okay, so if the other person is telling you something sad or something bad that happened to them, you're not going to say, uh, that's lucky. You're not going to use that one. Okay, so you have to be careful with the one that you use. And that's it for the topic. I know that this topic is a little bit more complicated because we have three different tenses in the same topic. But if you have any questions, please do ask me, okay? And I'm also going to explain the oral exam. Okay, so here. For the oral exam, remember it's going to be in pairs. If you don't want to work in pairs, that's fine. Just make sure to tell me so we can arrange a time that we can both have. And I'm going to be your partner for the oral exam. Remember, the oral exam is going to be graded individually, so it doesn't really matter if you do it by yourself or with someone else. So each person, each student is going to have a character, setting, and event, and type of event. I already gave them to you. It's in Schoology already. So you have to use the unit's vocabulary. What do I mean with the unit's vocabulary? The tenses. So you have to use simple past, past progressive or past continuous, and past perfect. I was going to use present perfect. No, that's not the one that you're going to use. So you have to use these three tenses, and you can use any of them. If you want to only use the simple past, that's fine. But if you want to use the three of them, that's better. I'm not going to give you extra points for using the three of them, but it's better for you if you use all three of them. Okay? So your story has to have a beginning, middle, and end of the story. So you have to talk about different things that happen in your story. It has to be a realistic one. If you want to, you can add some fantastic things into the story. A unicorn if you want to, an ovni. I don't know, you can use an UFO. It's a UFO in English. So you can use anything you want in your story, but try to make it realistic, okay? And of course, you have to use the character that I gave you and the setting. So you have to use, you have to have a beginning, middle, and end for your story. And you have to show interest into the other person that is telling you the story. So remember, you're going to switch roles. So first, one of you is going to be telling your story, and then the other one is going to tell your story. And each of you is going to have to show interest into the other person's story. So remember, use any short phrases like, really? Oh, that's really interesting. Oh, that's really sad. Oh, so try to act a little bit like you're actually interested into the other person's story, okay? And of course, you have to use the unit's vocabulary. If you want to, you can send me the text for your conversation, so I have time to check it. And remember, you can upload the video, or you can tell me, and we can arrange a time, and we can have the conversation in Zoom, okay? So we have many options. If you have any questions, please do ask me. And that's it. So goodbye.